In Week 3 of the 2023 NFL season, Miami Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel and his offense put together one of the most prolific performances in league history. An early touchdown pass from Tua Tagovailoa to Tyreek Hill opened the floodgates to a surge of explosive plays by Miami's offense. Carried mostly by their aerial attack, the Dolphins put the game all but out of reach for Denver by halftime. In the second half, Coach McDaniel dialed the aggression back by leaning more heavily on run plays to eat away at the clock, but the offense just kept scoring. About halfway through the fourth quarter, Miami led by a score of 63-20, and facing second down and short with his backups in the game, Coach McDaniel called a split zone toss to his rookie running back De'Von Achane, who took it for a 67-yard touchdown. The extra point that followed made the Dolphins the first team to score 70 points in an NFL game since 1966. Miami's explosive passing attack made this a blowout, but the run is what allowed the Dolphins to break records that day. They finished with 350 yards on the ground. No other team last season even touched 300. Coach McDaniel's expertise in the run game was on display in a way that we rarely see from a play caller. Later on, I'll get into the X's and O's side of what makes Miami's run game special. But first, let me dive into Coach McDaniel's integral and complex relationship with the run, which requires us to go back to 2006, when McDaniel first became an assistant coach in the NFL. Still in his early 20s, McDaniel was hired by the Houston Texans to be an offensive assistant under head coach Gary Kubiak. But that first coaching job didn't last. During McDaniel's third year in Houston, Kubiak fired him for showing up late to work twice. With little coaching experience, McDaniel was relegated to the UFL, where he coached running backs for 2 seasons. In 2011, he got a second chance in the league, this time in Washington as an offensive assistant under head coach Mike Shanahan and offensive coordinator Kyle Shanahan. Washington's staff also included assistant coaches Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur, both of whom were hired a year earlier when Mike Shanahan first took over. Though Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, Sean McVay, and now Mike McDaniel were all working together to win football games, the work environment was extraordinarily competitive, as the offensive coaches under Kyle Shanahan worked long hours to get plays onto his call sheet. Matt LaFleur was the quarterback's coach, and by 2012, Sean McVay was promoted to tight ends coach. But Mike McDaniel remained an offensive assistant, one step below the position coach titles that LaFleur and McVay now held. Jordan Rodrigue, who covers the Rams for The Athletic, hosted a podcast called The Playcallers, where she dove deep into the dynamics of the Shanahan coaching tree. It's a phenomenal piece of journalism that I highly recommend to anyone who's interested in learning more about the Shanahan tree straight from its members, and it'll be linked in the description. But for now, I want to focus on this quote from Mike McDaniel, describing his work environment in Washington. McDaniel said, quote, "I recognize that Matt and Sean were just competing for Kyle's ear. How do I stand out? It's off-putting to me when people are in pissing matches for somebody's affection. So I knew I wasn't going to participate in that. And I was like, well, in the run portion, when we're watching stuff as a staff, all he was doing was talking to Chris Foerster," end quote. Foerster was the offensive line coach in Washington, and Kyle Shanahan would look to him, and only him, for expertise on the run game. McDaniel continued to say, quote, "So I asked to be in the offensive line room, and I was in the line room for a year and a half, then became the receiver coach. But sure enough, when we got fired from Washington, Kyle could only bring one assistant, so he brought me," end quote. By sitting in on those offensive line meetings and studying the run game tirelessly, McDaniel made himself valuable to Kyle Shanahan in a way that Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur weren't. So when the Washington staff was fired following the 2013 season, Sean McVay was retained as offensive coordinator, Matt LaFleur took a quarterback's job at Notre Dame, and Mike McDaniel followed Kyle Shanahan to Cleveland as wide receivers coach. McDaniel's commitment to becoming a run game expert gave him Kyle Shanahan's ear. So when Shanahan took the offensive coordinator job in Atlanta in 2015, he brought McDaniel with him. Then when Shanahan got his first head coaching job in San Francisco in 2017, he brought McDaniel again, this time to be run game coordinator. Fast forward to 2022, after 5 seasons with the 49ers, McDaniel was hired to be the new head coach of the Miami Dolphins. The competitive advantage McDaniel gained through the run game over a decade ago has carried through his short time as head coach of the Dolphins. He's become the most creative run game designer in the league, and that creativity has translated into top-tier production on the ground without top-tier talent in Miami's run game personnel. In 2023, the Dolphins averaged 5.1 yards per run play, which ranked first in the league despite injuries all over the offensive line and, at least going into the season, an average backfield. Teron Armstead, Robert Hunt, and Connor Williams all missed significant time last season, and continuity is paramount on the offensive line. But Miami's blockers were near the top of the league in terms of setting their ball carriers up for success. The yards that ball carriers average before contact per attempt is a pretty good indicator of how good the offensive line is at creating yards for the ball carrier. And last season, Miami averaged 1.85 yards before contact per attempt, which ranked third in the league. Before 2023, Dolphins running back Raheem Mostert had never gone over 1,000 yards rushing, and De'Von Achane was a third-round rookie. But in 2023, Miami's ball carriers averaged a league-leading 3.25 yards after contact per attempt. Mostert also finished first in the league with 18 rushing touchdowns, and Achane now ranks first all-time in yards per carry among qualifiers with an average of 7.8. But as much as that performance was a result of Miami's backs being good football players, it was a result of Coach McDaniel and his staff tailoring the scheme to their strengths as runners. In terms of the run, no play caller got more out of his personnel last season than Mike McDaniel. So today, I want to talk about McDaniel's innovation in the run game, and why some of his key run game strategies have been so successful. But in order to appreciate the role that these strategies play, it's important to first understand the foundational identity of Miami's run game. The Dolphins prioritize speed at skill positions more than any other team in the league. Here's a list of the top 10 fastest ball carriers on a single play in the 2023 regular season. As you can see, 6 of the 10 fastest top speeds reached belong to Dolphins players. Tyreek Hill is on there 3 times, De'Von Achane twice, and Raheem Mostert once. Through both the run and the pass, Coach McDaniel wants to get his fastest guys in space. They call a lot of runs that stretch the defense horizontally. They want to test the range of the heavier linebackers and force the lighter defensive backs to take on blocks and tackle. Last year, Miami ranked second in the league in their frequency of run calls that went outside the tackles. They also ranked at or near the top of the league in their frequency of pitch, end around, and stretch calls that are designed to put horizontal stress on the defense. Motion is key to everything this offense does. You'll often hear analysts talk about Miami's use of the cheat motion in the pass game to give their receivers a head start before the ball is snapped, but McDaniel's use of motion is not exclusive to the pass. In fact, last season, the Dolphins used motion on 81% of their pass plays, but 85% of their run plays, for an overall motion rate of 83%, the highest in the league by 7 percentage points. Motion at the snap has changed the way zone scheme staples like wide zone and split zone function and look in Coach McDaniel's offense. Split zone runs, for example, call for a blocker to cut off the backside defensive end against the flow of the offensive line. The technique is known as a sift block, and it's usually executed by a tight end who's set pre-snap. Last season, the Indianapolis Colts called split zone at the highest rate in the league, and this play from Week 18 against Houston is a good example of what their split zone calls typically look like. Post-snap, the offensive line will block down with the flow of the running back, and the tight end will sift across the formation to kick out the backside defensive end. Jonathan Taylor does a nice job of cutting against the leverage of the defensive lineman, and takes this for a 49-yard touchdown. Now, in Coach McDaniel's offense, that sifting tight end is often put in motion right before the snap. Let me use this play from Miami's Week 16 game against Dallas to show you what this looks like in action. Miami is in their go-to 21 personnel with Durham Smythe lined up as the Y tight end, Alec Ingold lined up off the line of scrimmage as the H, and Raheem Mostert in the backfield. The call is split zone to the right, which tells the offensive line to zone block play side and Ingold to sift block the backside defensive end. Right before the snap, Ingold goes in motion, and that little tiny head start makes this cutback lane bigger than it would have been if Ingold executed the block without moving at the snap. It seems wrong to call this type of motion at the snap genius because it's so simple. Coach McDaniel didn't invent it, but he does use it more than any other team in the league by a lot. The counter-argument to motion at the snap like this is that it could telegraph the play call to the defense before the ball is snapped. But that's not the case for Miami, because this specific motion is not exclusive to split zone runs. Take a look at this play from back in Week 7 against Philadelphia. Here, Miami called wide zone lead to the boundary with motion at the snap, but that motion initially makes this look like split zone to the field. As Durham Smythe runs toward the field side of the formation, the entire defense is thinking split zone. The linebackers bump over toward the field side, and the field side defensive end widens out preparing for that sift block. Think about it from Brandon Graham's perspective too. On any zone scheme run that comes to his side, whether it's wide zone, mid zone, or split zone, he needs to set a hard edge. So when Smythe goes in motion, Graham's focus turns to setting that edge outside of the right tackle. Post-snap, when Smythe comes back to the boundary to lead block for this zone run, he chips Graham on the edge, which helps the right tackle seal him inside. That gives Raheem Mostert the wide lane, and Coach McDaniel's objective to test the range of the linebackers and to force the defensive backs to be physical is achieved. Now, the wide corner Darius Slay has to set the edge against Smythe moving at full speed, which he can't do without getting knocked back, and Nakobe Dean has to get all the way out to fill the cutback lane, which his range doesn't allow him to do. That lets Mostert reach the third level of the defense and pick up a gain of 21 yards. Another element of Coach McDaniel's creativity comes in the form of toss plays, some of which look like this one from Week 15 against the Jets. After he takes the snap, Tua turns to his left, faking a typical handoff from the pistol, then tosses the ball to the back on a wide path toward the sideline. The run functions like a typical wide toss play. The guards and tight end pin the defensive lineman, and the 3 remaining offensive linemen advance to the second level. The effect of that fake handoff at the mesh point is it holds those second level defenders, which gives the advancing linemen leverage advantages. Another key detail here is the design forcing Sauce Gardner, lined up on the right side of your screen, to crack replace. The defensive end gets crack blocked by the tight end, and in order for the defense to keep gap integrity, Sauce Gardner needs to get outside of that crack block to force a cutback. Sauce can't process that change in his assignment quickly enough to keep gap integrity. That allows the advancing right tackle to seal him inside with ease. Quincy Williams, on the other hand, actually does a decent job of forcing Mostert to cut back, but there's nobody there to finish the play. That's, again, because of the chaos at the mesh point. As I play this over again, I want you to look only at the nickel, Michael Carter. Notice his hesitation when Tua turns to his left after receiving the snap. That hesitation prevents Carter from reaching Mostert when the cutback is finally forced. Carter is essentially forced to play catch-up from the moment the ball is snapped by Coach McDaniel's creativity at the mesh point. All it is a fake handoff to nobody. Mostert isn't there to take the football, but Carter, and to a lesser extent the other second-level defenders, fall for it anyway. And you can't really blame them. As defenders, they're conditioned to track the ball, and this is just something that they aren't used to seeing. What they are used to seeing is toss plays that are unambiguously headed for the sideline. So to add a layer of ambiguity, Coach McDaniel also designs toss plays that attack the middle of the field. Take this play from Week 12 as an example. Just before the snap, the tight end goes in motion toward the boundary side, which causes the linebackers to shift with the motion. Then Tua tosses the ball to the back, which tells the defenders that this run is going toward the sideline. Toss plays are often accompanied by a crack block on a linebacker or down lineman from an eligible receiver. And here you can see the linebacker, Jamien Sherwood, expecting to get cracked. That causes him to overset to the outside and makes the alley bigger for Jeff Wilson. This run wasn't designed to go out wide at all. Instead of lead blocking toward the sideline, the fullback is inserting in the backside A gap. Wilson pushes that gap, which causes CJ Mosley to occupy it, then he gets downhill and picks up 14 yards. Coach McDaniel was asked about the value of these atypical toss play designs back in 2021 when he was in San Francisco. I don't know who asked the question, so if somewhere out there knows who it was, please drop a comment so that I can give them credit. But a reporter asked, quote, "This might be a dumb question, but why do you pitch the ball on inside runs? Normally you expect a pitch to be outside, left, or right. What's the value of pitching the ball directly back?" End quote. Here's what McDaniel had to say in response.
Ball directly back.
Not a dumb question. The value is what you just said. Is you do that when you feel like there's something that the defense is keyed on, and when the quarterback reverses out and tosses the ball, that you might get overplay, or there's a ton of different variables, but that would be it in itself. It's the usual. So you try to be sound, but also just get defenses a hair off. Because if they're a hair off, that gives us an advantage, and with a lot of players that we're very confident in, that can be the difference in 3 yards or 15 yards.
Basically, McDaniel explains that he uses these abnormal strategies because they're abnormal. They take advantage of the way that defenders are conditioned to play. He didn't necessarily invent any of the innovative designs that you've seen today, but when atypical designs are called frequently and executed with clear intent, you get an offense that looks and produces unlike any other unit in the league. The drawback to such innovation is that the league always catches up. When coaches rely too heavily on their X's and O's rather than their Jimmies and Joes, they're bound to fail eventually. That's just how this league works. Talent has always been paramount. The key is to stockpile talent and be a leader of the newest trend rather than a follower. Aside from a few personnel question marks, that describes the current state of Miami's offense, mostly because of their capabilities on the ground. In the cat and mouse game between pro offenses and defenses, defenses are catching up. The line on this graph represents the average yards per game among all NFL offenses by year. The explosion of the pass is responsible for the surge in offensive production between 2005 and 2015. We saw the all-time peak of offensive performance in terms of both yards per game and points per game in 2020. But since then, defenses have caught up at an alarmingly fast pace. Pass yards per attempt are dropping, and to a lesser extent, rush yards per attempt are rising, because defenses have grown to prioritize the pass. Too high safety coverage shells are rampant, and nickel personnel is the new base, both of which make defenses lighter and faster than ever. That has already begun to bring the run back, and that trend will continue until defenses force a new one. The league is constantly changing, and right now, Mike McDaniel's offense has the potential to be at the forefront of that change because of his relationship with the run. He looked to the run to prove his value to Kyle Shanahan over a decade ago, and now he can look to it to turn the Dolphins into an offensive powerhouse. Thank you guys so much for watching this week's video. If you'd like to support the channel, you can check out my Patreon and Twitter, both of which will be linked in the description. But that's all I've got for now, so until next time, peace.